My guest today is Alice Brown, the founder of Seventh Wave Stories, a narrative strategy and conversion copied studio that helps brands turn human insight into powerful storytelling and performance. Alice writes copy that's not just persuasive, but emotionally intelligent. The kind that makes people feel seen, not sold to. With over a decade of experience across the outdoor and adventure industries, she has worked with purpose driven brands to build trust, drive conversions, and bring more empathy into marketing. In this episode, we dive into how psychology shapes customer decisions, what it really means to create psychological safety in copy, and why the future of marketing still belongs to those who understand people, not just algorithms. Alice, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Completely my pleasure. I just straight away jump to my first question, which is you have had such an interesting journey from working in outdoor and adventure sports, such as skiing, to becoming a narrative strategist and conversion copywriting. What led you to make that shift? And how did that experience shape the way you write today?
It all started with a week doing work experience at a surf school on the north coast of Cornwall, which is where I now live. At the time, I lived up country near Reading, and all of our summer holidays were spent down in Cornwall. I love being in the sea. I didn't have the best experience at school, so any opportunity I had to be in Cornwall, I was there. And
Yeah.
so while all of my friends were going to lawyers or Superdrug to do their work experience, I wanted to do it at the surf school. And so I sat on the cliffs with the other instructors. I learnt about weather systems and I helped in the kids' lessons and I pushed them into little waves. And from that moment on, I was hooked. And every opportunity I had, I would spend on the beach or like in the surf school office, talking to customers or teaching beginners. As I got more confident, I started to teach people who were more advanced and catching bigger waves, people who'd been surfing for ages. And over time, I realized that every interaction I had with a customer, whether it was before they booked or when we're actually in the water and we're trying to encourage them to catch a bigger wave, there were all these little mental blocks in their head.
Yeah.
There were these hesitations that made them nervous about taking that next step or getting out of their comfort zone. And I did a few winter seasons in ski resorts in Japan and Germany. And I did a small bit of ski coaching, not much, but again, mostly my work was in the office and interacting with future customers. And I realized I was doing the exact same thing. I was helping people wanting to get out of their comfort zone, feel confident taking that step. And, they're really seasonal jobs. You only get 3 to 6 months of being busy. Even if you move to different hemispheres on different sides of the world, I wanted to be more indispensable to these companies that I worked for. So I started to learn about writing blogs. I think I read every Neil Patel blog under the sun, started writing little articles that addressed these obstacles and hesitations people felt. So, for example, why do you want to wake up at the crack of dawn and get in the sea when it's still quite cold and no one else is around?
Yeah.
What's the benefit of that? Because people don't want to. They're on their holiday. They want to relax.
Yeah.
They want to have a lazy morning.
Yeah.
But the benefit is the winds are different. They're usually lighter. There's less people in the water. So you've got less competition.
Yeah.
I started writing these articles to encourage people to get out of their comfort zone before they've even sent us an email to say, yes, we want to arrive and book in. And we started to get traction with this. And I started to get comments from people saying that they enjoyed reading it and it sort of struck a chord. Then COVID hits. I can't go surfing. Well, some people went surfing, but at least there were police going up and down the road next to the beach, telling people off for getting in the sea. And I didn't know what to do with myself. So I just started writing more. And so I kind of transitioned into this marketing world by accident, where I was coming at writing content and copy for brands from this approach of I'm helping your customers overcome a problem, get out of their comfort zone, feel confident in themselves, trying something new. And so that nowadays, when I'm helping brands come up with strategy for what messaging should we use for this next campaign, or what do we talk about on this landing page, or how do we get people off Instagram to sign up for our email list and then convert at the other end of the email list, we're always thinking about those obstacles in people's heads. They could be
Yeah.
physical obstacles. I worked with some adaptive surfers when I was at a surf school.
Yeah.
You know, they've been burnt before, they've had a really shitty experience where
Yeah.
they've wiped out or the instructor wasn't that good. Now I
Yeah.
don't just work with outdoor sports brands and service-based businesses. I work with a range of brands, but it's still that thought process in the head of the customer
Yeah.
that I'm always trying to address.
Yeah.
And that is always my approach nowadays. First and foremost, speaking to those little niggles or worries in the head of the customer.
Your method or approach is basically talking or speaking to customers first and trying to understand their pain points and convert the copy or create the copy accordingly. And as you have mentioned that basically while you were starting, trying to start within this industry, which is marketing, you basically read all Neil Patel's blogs. So I'm sure there has to be a technicality as well that you basically apply in your in your writing. Because what's the balance of SEO and creative writing? What's the, if you have to basically divide it into numbers or percentage?
I don't know about percentages, but I can tell you the process that I would go through
Yeah.
to get that balance if I'm writing web copy, for example. And for me, it's always about human first. Every time
Mhm.
it's human first. It's got to hook an actual human being. So
Yeah.
many SEO metrics are impacted by how humans interact with a piece of content or how
Yeah.
long they stay on a website or how many pages they click through to. So it's human first for me. The sort of more technical, algorithmical elements
Yeah.
in terms of keywords,
Yeah.
structuring pages with headings, paragraph text, etc., metadata, they come secondary. They
Yeah.
are still, we know they're important,
Yeah.
but I've got to get that message right first
Right.
because
Right.
I could have all the keywords in all the right places. But if it's not going to speak to that human, your authority is going to fall because people
Of
aren't going
course.
to engage with it.
Engage
So
with
it's
it.
always coming from that point of view of who is this person? What do they
Yeah.
feel right now? What do they
Yeah.
want to feel? How
Yeah.
can we be that bridge between those two different things, where
Yeah.
they are now and where they want to be?
Yeah.
And
Wow.
then once we've come up with that strategy and the content or the copy, where can we add those technical elements that still make it feel really natural? Because
Yeah.
we've all been on websites where we can tell what the keyword is within about 4 seconds of being on a web page because it's so unnatural and it's clunky and they've got
Yeah.
one paragraph with the same keyword shoved in 4 times.
Yeah. Yeah.
And as a consumer, I
Yeah.
don't want to engage with that. Even if their product or service is like to a T exactly what I need,
Yeah.
and actually they are the best in their industry, I don't
Yeah.
want to engage with that because I'm feeling resistant. I'm feeling it's awkward. They're not
Yeah.
talking to me.
Yeah.
So it's an ordered thing. Human
Yeah.
first, like
Human first.
SEO technicalities for the
Yeah.
algorithm come afterwards.
Yeah. So speaking of humans and emotions, my next question is you talk, or I would say, on your LinkedIn, I have seen that you often talk about emotional intelligent copy. What does that mean to you? And how is it different from just writing persuasive copy?
Yeah, that's a really good question. My training in conversion copywriting is all about persuasion. And
Persuasion.
if you read Cialdini's 7 levels of influence, that's what a lot of conversion copywriting is based on. You know, the urgency, the authority, the likability factor. But the more I use those techniques and the more I learn about conversion copywriting, I still use that as like such a strong drive
Yeah.
in what I do, but it feels very tactical.
Yeah.
It feels like you're just engaging someone to take a single action. And so the reason I've wanted to bring in the emotional intelligence, and that's how I've changed my own process and the way that I explain what I do, is because with that emotional intelligence, you're actually writing copy and content for longevity. You're writing for like a retained relationship with someone because you're linking to their intrinsic motivations or their intrinsic feelings, not
Yeah.
just the extrinsic, not just will help
Yeah.
you perform X times better or faster or will deliver this service cheaper than someone else. Yes, they can be useful tactics to use and layer on top, but the foundation needs to be that emotional intelligence. And for me, that what that emotional intelligence means is that you have an awareness of who you're talking to.
Yeah.
You have a skill in talking to them so they feel seen and heard. It's
Yeah.
almost like those social skills that, if you talk about, you learn about leadership or networking, you're being taught about how to build a relationship with someone, build that rapport, and that,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's that two-way relationship of,
Yeah.
I'm going to provide you value, but
Yeah.
you want to trust me because I understand what you've been through. And
Yeah.
the nuances change depending on what ideal client you're
Yeah.
talking to or what brand you're writing for. But it's all about the self-awareness of who you are as a brand and how you fit into their lifestyle.
Yeah.
But the empathy that is going to create that initial connection with an individual that
Yeah.
can surpass all the little tactics that you can use.
Yeah.
We've all had, I'm guessing most of the people listening to this are going to be in marketing or, run
Yeah.
brands. Like we all get those like emails from B2B brands who are selling us new tech or a new
Yeah.
solution of some kind. And it's all features and benefits. And it's very
Yeah.
surface level. And
Yeah.
it's that, again, those tactics which you feel like you're being sold to rather than being seen and heard. And
Yeah.
so similar to like how you would write for SEO, the
Yeah.
messaging comes on the bottom and you can layer all those tactics on top to help the efficacy of it. But just the tactics alone, just speaking to those, for example, like those elements that Cialdini brings out in trying to influence someone alone, that might make someone take an action, but it's not going to get them to take the same action again and again, or for that brand to be memorable and someone to feel like they want to stay loyal to that brand.
Wow. Influence. Because I'm just, going back to your when I asked the first question, you mentioned that even if a customer, even as a brand, even if you are selling the best product or the perfect product for a customer, he is not going to buy it if you are not directly speaking at them or you're not being able to evoke any sort of emotion. Why is that?
I mean, I wouldn't say people aren't going to buy it full stop. I think we can look at this through the frame of looking at the different types of buyers that exist in the world. There are fast-paced decision makers who
Yeah.
are going to buy off price or
Yeah.
they've only got a certain amount of time. It's, sometimes related to certain personality types who are competitive,
Yeah.
or they're instinctual in their purchasing decisions. But that's not everyone. Those tactics might work on some people alone without that deep intrinsic messaging. But we
Mhm.
also have the people who are more thoughtful decision makers. They're methodical or they're looking for those humanistic elements that
Yeah.
they're going to do their research. They're going to look at your reviews. They're going to look at the
Yeah.
person that exists behind the brand. They're going to
Yeah.
follow you on Instagram or sign up to your email list for
Yeah.
weeks, months, maybe even years before they buy something from you. And,
Yeah.
with my own clients, I'm seeing, lead time. Like I had someone who came to one of my workshops 4 years ago. I
Yeah.
ran a marketing workshop on, funnily enough, SEO and content marketing and how you need to balance the human with the technical. They came to a marketing workshop 4 years ago. So they paid me 30 quid
Yeah.
4 years ago. I haven't, we like each other's stuff on Instagram every now and again. I think
Yeah.
she's a really inspirational person. So without her being a client of mine, like
Yeah.
I'm a fan of her. She's now come back to me about 3 weeks ago and said, look, I need some work. Like we're looking at like a 6-month retainer of work, which is wonderful. She's one of those humanistic decision makers and methodical decision makers that
Yeah.
needs to build up that rapport with someone before they can feel like they're
Yeah.
gonna
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
they trust you with.
Trust you. Yeah.
But for most of us, some people it's not significant, but for a lot of us, a
Yeah.
significant amount of money.
Yeah.
So yeah, to your question, those tactics will work on some people, but not on
Yeah.
everyone. And I think you need to consider addressing both of those types
Yeah.
of people when you're writing copy or writing content.
Yeah.
Who are those people who are going to make a split decision? How can you serve them? Who are those
Yeah.
people who are going to take 6 months to 4 years to make a decision? How can
Yeah.
you just keep supporting them, keep that relationship going, and trust in the long term that
Yeah.
that groundwork you're going to do is going to pay
Yeah.
off
Yeah.
at some point?
So when you start working with a brand, how do you uncover the psychological motivation driving their customers' decisions. And since you write so deeply from the customer's point of view, I want to know what's your process for really getting inside their heads, especially when you are not the target audience, because it's like, I mean, again, I think it can be tricky. How do you basically put yourself into their shoes and then, start writing? Because, yeah, I think that's the hardest part. Yeah.
This is one thing I don't think AI is going to be able to ever replicate is human conversations,
Yeah.
talking to actual customers of that brand. I'm gonna personally have a preconceived idea of why I think their customers buy, but that can be completely wrong. So the first thing I will always do is set up surveys to talk to the people who've bought from the brand quite recently. They get an option at the end of the survey to either keep it anonymous if they want to leave some scathing feedback or something that's a bit personal, they don't want attributed to them. That is totally their prerogative. But we're still gathering deep insights into their decision-making process to buy. If they're happy to not leave it anonymous, you can send us
Yeah.
type in their email address. I will get in contact to chat with them on a Zoom call. And both the interviews and the surveys initially I was just using the jobs to be done framework.
Yeah.
What are you using this product for? How does it fit into your life? What alternative solutions did you look at alongside this product we're selling? Were there any alternatives that you thought about? What were those hesitations that stopped you from buying?
Mhm.
And the surveys give us quantitative data. The interviews give us qualitative data. And
Yeah.
so we get rich insights into those motivations for people to
Yeah.
buy, but we also get insights into those barriers.
Wow.
And sometimes they're quite surface level. Sometimes you need to read under the surface and
And
sort of understand what that subtext of what they're saying is.
yeah.
But over time, that jobs to be done framework, it's incredibly useful and it drives a lot of the stuff I write. But again, it can be, not always, but it can be more tactical. So what I've introduced into this survey and interview process is this understanding of the intrinsic motivation to buy
Yeah.
something. Or maybe not even to buy something. Why did you sign up to this email list? Why did you go to this event?
Yeah.
And so if we can get under their skin and go that layer deeper and ask, okay, if I use an example of a course, like an online sports training course, well, what was it? What drove you to buy it? And I'll get an answer. And then I'll
Yeah.
say, well, what's so important to you about
Yeah.
the reason they bought it? What's so
Yeah.
important to you about that next answer? If you can just keep asking and asking and asking, you
Yeah.
sometimes find people sit in they find it quite difficult to answer the question. And when there are those moments of silence, I used to always just try and fill it in and just chat away and give them some suggestions of what the answer
Yeah.
might be, which I think is probably, they just want to fill the silence so they'll agree with you. What
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
learned to do is just sit there in that silence and let people mull it over.
Yeah.
There's a wonderful lady called Sarah Flynn who I met at a networking event.
Yeah.
And I was talking to her about this humanistic approach to marketing. And we were talking about interview techniques. And I said to her, well, if someone says, well, I bought this course because I wanted to get better at this sport. And I'd
Yeah.
say, okay, well, why? Why do you want to get better?
Yeah.
And she taught me about this process I think it's executive coaching and possibly counseling as well. They use it where instead
Yeah.
of asking, why did you buy it?
Yeah.
You say, what's so important to you about something? So when you ask someone why, they're going to
Yeah.
formulate an answer, whether it's true or not, because they want to have an
Yeah.
answer for you. So
Yeah.
if I said to you, why did you go for a walk at the weekend? Well, I had spare time and, someone else
Yeah.
wanted to go. What's so important to you about going for a walk at the weekend? Well, I wanted to clear my head, and you attach, you go into that importance rather than trying to fill the
Yeah.
gap, if that makes sense. And so she really helped me and helped me with these interview techniques, basically to
Yeah.
get into that understanding of what that intrinsic motivation is. And that's a lot of where that emotional intelligence comes from, because you're saying
Yeah.
to people, like, I understand. I understand. To use an example from
Yeah.
my own work, I worked with a supplements brand, and they are based in the US, and we looked at a load of their competitors, and all their competitors were talking about increased sports performance, increased strength, being able to do weights for longer,
Yeah.
longevity, because you're stronger
Yeah.
and more resilient.
Yeah.
And when I spoke to the founder, the founder's point of view was, well, I'm partially creating it for myself, but also I want my parents to like live longer and have better experiences, and I want them to be
Yeah.
resilient.
Yeah.
And then when we interviewed a load of people that looked like their ideal client, because the brand hadn't launched yet, we just had to find people that fit who
Yeah.
we thought the ideal client was,
Yeah.
who that individual was. They said, well, when we kept asking what's important to you about looking after your health, taking supplements, they said, well, I want to run rings around my 5-year-old, or I don't want to let them run rings around me, or I've got to look after my mum because she's not very well, or, instead of what we thought like that surface level messaging was, we could have just used similar messaging to everyone else in like, or like we almost positioned it as like everyone else is quite selfish because they're doing it for you. We're giving you supplements because you want to be there for someone else. And you can do that when you are fit and healthy and you aren't lacking in anything. And you've got the energy and the capacity to be there for other people. So it can be really surprising what comes up with. And I think that just shows the power of asking those questions that go a level deeper. This exercise as well has been really useful when I have brands that come to me and say, this is our messaging, this is what we want you to say, this is why people buy from us. And I just want to challenge it. I always want to challenge it and say, let's ask people and see if the reason you think they buy is the same as why they are actually buying. And often there is a disconnect between those two things. Often I will ask brands like if they've done their own research before.
Yeah.
And it can be an interesting process where they have their own surveys and research, because a lot of the time when brands do customer research, it's, what did you like about our product? What was the best thing? What did you think of the price? Did you like the customer experience? It's almost like they're fishing for compliments. And there will be great insights you can get for product development from that,
Yeah.
or your customer experience, or your post-purchase email flow.
Yeah.
But it's about asking those questions that are impartial. You're not leading answers. You're trying to be unbiased with what that they respond, because they could just say, they can leave an answer blank if they want to, but you're leaving that space open for them to bring anything to the table. And I think it can be surprising for brands. A lot of them are resistant. Obviously, it costs money to do that,
Yeah.
because like I think it pays back in dividends, because not only are you talking to your customers, but by doing this process, I've never done this process and come out with insights at the end that match up what another brand's talking about. It helps
Yeah.
you differentiate so much, because they might have done their customer research, but their customers are entirely different to you. Even if you have the same
Yeah.
product, you have different customers. And so the output is always going to be different. And that output will drive, that big idea, or that key message that we use on whatever asset that we're writing.
Yeah.
So it can be that, it's powerful enough to be that connective tissue between
Yeah.
your Instagram and your email list and your landing page and your post-purchase, headlines. There's that staying power, that it's a powerful enough an idea to connect to your customers on all of those platforms. So you have that consistency and coherence of messaging
Across all platforms.
across all the other platforms.
According to you, what's the common barrier that stops customers from saying no? And from what you have written about creating psychological safety, how can brands make customers feel safe enough to take that action instead of hesitating or just dropping off?
One of the biggest barriers, I think, is past experiences. So, positioning your brand. First of all, understand what that past experience looks like for your customers. What went wrong before? What was different? How is your brand or your product or your service different from that?
Yeah.
I think getting burnt in the past means that the barrier your customer has to scale or overcome to get to the point where they're going to say yes to you, if they've, there are all these perceived barriers anyway, but negative experience in the past just makes that barrier higher and more difficult for you to break down. So addressing, saying, we understand that this has gone wrong before. You
Yeah.
don't, some brands have that bold personality that they can name other brands that do things differently and not as well as them. Some brands don't, but there's still a way of saying, look, we understand you've had this frustration in the past with other potential options. This is how we do it differently. Again, it allows you to differentiate and let those differentiators shine through. Psychological safety can also just come from knowing what you're buying into. I've had so many brands tell me, or I've seen so many sort of experts online saying, leave a bit of intrigue and excitement around what they're going to get once they buy it or once they sign up for something, that the excitement of the unknown. No, it's fear of the unknown and not understanding what comes next. So if it's a SaaS product, giving people a real clear walkthrough of what all the elements are, those like mega lists that you get of every single detail that is going to impact their experience and everything on the inside, rather than just saying, we'll speed up your workflows because we have an element that's going to do that for you. Well, what does that actually look like in my life? In this sense, it's actually creating an image in the head of your reader, prospective customer, about what's next. And if you can align that with that desire that they have, that makes that, stepping forwards into this new space feel more possible and attainable for them. So actually being really visceral in your descriptions of what comes next, whether that is features of a SaaS product, whether it's how they're going to feel once they've caught a bigger wave on a surf lesson. It could be, how far they're going to be able to run with their new pair of trainers, but like painting that picture in their head. So you're connecting them to that imagined future. It's a psychological process called construal level theory, where they can imagine themselves in that future. There's that feeling of success or whatever the other feelings you want them to be feeling or they're hoping to feel, and painting that picture for them so that they know what's to come. And any of those floating question marks are answered. So you just got to understand what those question marks are. How can we make that future feel possible for people? And we can do that through painting that picture of what the future looks like, not being vague or suggestive. Because, there are some people who argue that that's exciting for people, but psychology says that that's not the case and it doesn't drive people to take action.
Wow. So, what's one metric that most brands overvalue and one emotional cue they undervalue while designing a customer experience? Like you just mentioned that, for example, a SaaS form. They're like, okay, we are basically going to ease out your workflow, but how is it? I mean, customer is not being able to imagine. Then how exactly are you going to do that, or how is it going to impact their day-to-day life? So what's the one metric that most brands overvalue and one emotional cue that they undervalue?
It's not a metric in terms of numbers and statistical data, but I think something that so many brands put too much emphasis on is the fact, like, a lot of founders think that they are their best customers. You're laughing at this. I think you can understand. A lot of customers think, well, I had a problem and I solved this problem. I wanted to create a running jacket that was comfortable in the wind and it fit like a female figure rather than it just being like a men's version that they've made smaller.
Yeah.
So I am my best customer because I saw a problem in what didn't exist in the world. So I filled that gap and I created a product that it was comfortable running in the wind and it fit a female figure. Okay. 6 months ago, you might have been your ideal customer, but now with you have this sophisticated understanding of the materials that go into a jacket, the other competitors on the market, what processes they use compared to you. You have the motivation to build a business and understand how to create a brand where your customers are still stuck in that frustration phase. They don't have the sophisticated understanding of the area that you're in. If you think that once upon a time you might have been your ideal customer, but now you're not. And I think that just creates this disconnect again between how you would describe what you do and what your customers actually need, because sometimes they don't know what they need, but you still need to talk to that thing that they say that they need. And then it's an education process to say, actually, you need something different, or here's a different way of looking at your problem. In terms of actual statistical metrics, one that's come up quite recently is email open rates.
Yeah.
It is important, but it's not.
Really?
So when I'm writing an email sequence, for example, like I want an end goal. It's conversions, it's signups to an event, it's downloads of a document or a
Yeah.
report or views of a video on YouTube we're trying to send people to. That is number one, the most important metric. Now, when it comes to open rates, really all that tells you is how good your subject
Subject
line
line.
is. It
Yeah.
says nothing about your product. It says nothing about your messaging to it. Well, not nothing, but it's such a surface level metric that
Mhm.
I think people put too much emphasis on it as a win,
Yeah.
because I sign up to a lot of email lists because I want to unpick what people are doing and seeing, alternative strategies to a sales email or an education piece. And there are so many emails that I will open and bin straight away. So that's not a useful metric for the brand because I haven't, I might have read the headline, and if the headline's not interesting, I'm going to bin
Yeah.
it. It's not like your web statistics where you can see how long people spend on your pages. If you're, obviously you want a good open rate because you want people reading your emails, but really the marker of a good email is that final
Conversion.
statistic. So in that situation, oftentimes you'll find people who have 7 calls to action in an email. That's really hard to track what's working and what's not. So
Yeah.
I would say to that, like, be specific unless you have sort of like here are my top 10 things I've
Yeah.
been reading this week, or in which case you have multiple links. But if it's
Yeah.
actually a metric that means is going to move the needle in your business, again,
Yeah.
lead magnets, education pieces, driving people to a website, sales, one call to action. You can repeat that call to action loads of times, but one call to action is far more important than your open rates. If you are going into your emails and you have
Yeah.
a welcome sequence you want to optimize
Yeah.
for those conversions, even if
Yeah.
that conversion isn't money.
Yeah.
Think about what that next step is, because that's a far more useful insight into how your customers are acting and what they respond to. Was this button copy, effective? Was it not? Was the messaging above it effective? Was it not?
Yeah.
And it's just misdirection of where people put their attention.